I'm Amy Till, Programme Director at New London Architecture, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Andrew Jones, Cities Programme Leader at AECOM. Hello, Andrew.
Hi, morning, Amy.
So this pandemic's posed some fairly major challenges for those in urban environments. What do you think are the major impacts that we're going to see in the short term and the long term for our UK cities?
The short term has been almost a sort of a flight from the city where everybody's gone back to their homes and has found refuge there. But do we? And there's lots of positives about that. I mean, there's air quality and also sort of connecting better with our families and our local environments. And as the shops start to open, a bit of spend in local high streets that have been denuded of spend over the last few years. But in the long term, is that something that is going to prevail? And there's been a lot of talk around how we've got this huge working from home revolution, and that's going to pervade. I've got a slightly different view on that. I think in the long term, that cities over the last 3,000 or more years have suffered a lot worse than we're going through now, and the wars, fires, famines, disease hit cities particularly hard because they are concentrations of human civilization and life. But actually, but cities bounce back from that, and with the right leadership and the right planning and the right investments, then you come back with you can come back with a stronger city and place. But each one of those events leaves a memory of that event in the city. So whether it's a war that brings new city walls and or mass rebuilding program, or public health challenges like we've had. Particularly over the last 200 years, how we've used infrastructure and public health legislation and measures to affect how we build homes and our cities. Bazalgette sewers in London are a classic example of responding to public health and disease challenge. And look what that's given us in terms of part of the sort of the classic infrastructure of the capital. So I'm quite optimistic. We've got to do it right and do it carefully, and also think, put our investments where they're going to have the most impact on the communities that need them.
And you touched on the acceleration of remote working, and obviously digitalisation is having an impact in lots of areas. What do you think we need to be doing in cities to help our cities and our city centres thrive?
A lot of our teams that are working in workplace consulting have been thinking around this for a long time, pre-pandemic. Because that move to digitization and the flexibility of where we can work has been part of key strategies that our clients have been looking at to be more efficient as a business, and also to give people the flexibility that they need in the workplace to balance home and work life. And at AECOM we've had our Freedom to Grow program, which is essentially enabling people to work wherever is most convenient for them for a number of years. But that has needed a lot of digital investment, both by the firm and also relying on that to be reaching out to wherever people are working. So that's been going on anyway, but that team, our workplace consulting team, is now looking at that sort of the return to work programs that people are looking at, but also looking at that what the shift in attitudes is to where we work. And the big shift has been employers are now accepting that people can work efficiently when they're not at their desk 9 to 5, and that we can do this kind of thing for at least part of the time over a video call. We don't need to be in the same place to do some of that. So I think there's a balance, and I think we'll end up with the digitization of the workplace for those who can do it will mean that you can work at home, you can work on the bus, you can work on the train, you can work in a co-working space on your local high street, or you can work in the city. So in the office, so there's a big balance there of the huge flexibility that offers. I don't think the city centre is going to go away in any shape or form. And I think we have to remember that as humans, we want to collaborate. We want to, and innovation often comes through the serendipity of a moment at the coffee machine where you meet somebody you weren't planning on meeting, and you do something you decide to do something that's different or great. That's a little bit more constrained when you're on just on a video call all the time. So our need as humans to work together and to meet and to engage and trade, those elements of a city, which are the essences of why we come together in cities, it will always be there, and we will come back to that. But it means that we'll have a lot more flexibility in where we can work. So what does that mean for the city? I think it means that local high streets and town centres will get a boost, because people won't be coming into the office all the time. We will use our transport systems more flexibly as the rush hour isn't so compressed anymore, and that people can work from home to start of the day, take their children to school, then come into the office, perhaps do that twice a week, otherwise work in a co-working space in their local town. That flexibility will come through now that we've broken the taboo of getting on that train at whatever time in the morning and not coming home until after 5:30. So I think that creates some really interesting challenges for our city, how we run our transport networks and where we put our investments, because the potential here is that actually this could give a whole renaissance to our wider cities. We focused really strongly on regeneration of city centres as being the hub of trade and innovation and economic life. But actually, if that breaks a little, then actually the whole city can benefit. And in theory, we've got a lot more. We've got more real estate in play. We've got more of our transport network to use flexibly, and it could lead to greater economic growth and a better city in the longer term. But we've got to get that balance right in how we then recover and everybody coming back to work.
Flexibility feels like one of the really positive things to have come out of this crisis, and also people's connection with their local neighbourhoods and communities. And I know you're an advocate of multi-centred cities. Do you think this approach is going to help us tackle the economic and urban challenges that lie ahead of us?
Yeah, so I mean, multi-centred cities, or looking at the city regions rather than necessarily administrative boundaries, is key here, I think. And I'm an advocate of looking at as the city as a sort of ecosystem, rather than necessarily where in 1965 we decided to draw some boundaries around what we call Greater London. At that point, does that really reflect what London is today? And the same goes for the West Midlands or for Greater Manchester or for West Yorkshire. The boundaries of those metropolitan counties aren't necessarily the areas where that's economically, culturally and functionally connected. So let's look at the city region as a whole, because that's where we're going to get the greatest strength out of the economic connections between these places. There's another couple of elements there that actually looking at city regions means you can balance housing growth and put the investment in transport and social infrastructure and green infrastructure into the right places, rather than it's in my borough or city area or it's in yours. That is no longer our commuting patterns. And if we are going to commute from our local area into the city in a very different basis, then the whole economy becomes a lot more connected. It's like a spider's web of places that connect together. I think the final piece is around social equity, because it is those towns and suburbs at the edge of cities, outside the prime areas of the cities, that have suffered the most in terms of investment and demonstrate the most unequal opportunities and outcomes for their residents. And they're often not invested in the same way as we've invested in our city centres. So getting public transport to local areas, getting digital infrastructure in to make it a level playing field in terms of digital accessibility is absolutely critical in the future, as we start to look at where the best places are to put our investment to build back after the pandemic and economic crash that we are predicting.
And what about the green agenda? Boris said earlier this week, build back better, build back greener, build back faster. What do you see as the priorities for cities in driving the green economy?
Yeah, I think that's another good reason to look at cities and city regions together. We've done a lot of work for the GLA on the All London Green Grid, and also work with MHCLG and Homes England on a strategy for the evidence base behind a strategy for the Oxford, Milton Keynes, Cambridge Arc. And both of those components look at strategic green infrastructure as being critical to not only health and well-being and to wildlife and ecology, but also as a key underpinning element of our approach to decarbonisation and tackling climate change. Cities on their own are not going to be able to find the carbon sequestration or the biodiversity and environmental net gain land that they need to accommodate their own growth. We look at strategic projects that cut across boroughs or cut across cities or across city regions to make it work. And actually as a fundamental part of our green approach to building back better and the future economy. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't focus on decarbonisation of transport and decarbonisation of the building stock and retrofitting, but actually getting some of these big strategic pieces in place is fundamental as well.
And delivering housing is obviously another key issue to tackle. Do you think we need to be reevaluating our approach to density?
Reevaluating, yes, but not abandoning high density when it's built to great quality. I think there's a number of elements around here that we're already reappraising. Our teams that are looking at large-scale urban growth are already looking at the kind of topologies that we need. Many people listening to this will be sitting either in a comfortable place with lots of space to work and a garden to take air and get some exercise, or they'll be living in a higher density apartment that they're sharing with others, where they're sharing a workspace and have very little access to public space. When we are looking at higher density development, we also look at workspaces within homes and also how we look at green infrastructure in the city, more focus on parks, more focus on the public realm, the healthy streets agenda and good growth that the mayor in London and indeed the mayors in other cities are looking at the quality of public realm and making sure that we're focusing on pedestrians and cyclists in that environment to make dense living more human, as well as being close to the city centre.
The final question I had for you is, well, it's very rich territory and we've covered lots of important issues, but what do you think are the key things that cities should be focusing on to support recovery and then also future resilience?
I think that there's a couple of pieces that come out of the conversation that we've just had. Having a sort of comprehensive devolution across England is important, because there's a whole series of places that have devolution, they have power and they have resources and can bid for money for their key projects. And then there's places elsewhere in the city regions that don't have that devolution. So actually getting that balanced up, I think, is a key piece. And as a town planner, I would say this, but having strategic regional plans that aren't statutory plans but are based on collaboration across the city regions that look at where that investment needs to go is pretty fundamental. Once you've got the organisation bit out of the way, focusing firstly on the climate challenge and decarbonisation, and always having that as a golden thread that runs through any of the investment choices that we're making, because that will build a more resilient and responsive city in the future. Otherwise, it's probably looking at putting attention to local areas and what is going to be a renaissance for our local town centres and towns that aren't necessarily going to have a future that is successful unless we plan it right. So what is the future for the redundant small shopping mall in a suburban town? How do we make use of the transit orientated development opportunity around a suburban station that could well provide that local connection that enables people to live locally and access the city very, very, very closely? Some of the work that our teams are doing at the moment on working with TfL and others on local approaches to station regeneration is one of the things that will come through on that. We've already mentioned digital networks, and having even access to digital, I think, is a key piece here. Also, there's this balance between the nationally significant infrastructure projects, HS2, Crossrail 2, Northern Powerhouse Rail, Midlands Connect, getting all these pieces in place is fundamental for our national infrastructure and enabling our country to connect up, which is one of the big themes that Boris Johnson's talked about in his Dudley speech. Very important, but also so the local things, because if we get the buses right and we get access to cycleways and to green space in local areas and regenerate our towns, that's important. So getting this balance between the local and driving that from what local communities and LEPs and mayors are seeing as the big challenges, along with the big infrastructure projects, has to be the right balance as we look through. So they would be my priorities.
Andrew, this has been fascinating. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to us continuing the conversation and seeing how things evolve.
Yeah, it's good. Thanks, Amy.